Welcome to Inside the Sheriff's Office. I'm Sheriff Manuel Gonzales III. I'm here today with my very special guest, Joe Abbin. Joe wrote a book, Albuquerque Blues. Joe, I'd like you to talk a little bit more specifically about some of the major things that you're seeing in the differences when you were working with the Albuquerque Police Department and today, and how it's affecting the residents of Albuquerque and the crime crisis in Albuquerque.
Absolutely, and thank you, Sheriff, for inviting me. The biggest thing I see is something that seems like we've had to, that I see nationwide, we've had to learn and relearn. That if you take care of the small things, the big things sometimes take care of themselves. And one thing I notice that I've seen the difference between actually from the 60s, the 90s, and now the 2020s, is that we used to pay attention to all crime, and we actually made arrests on misdemeanors like shoplifting and simple assault and vandalism, for instance. Now I don't see us doing that, and it's been my experience that the criminals, if they think if there's no penalty, they'll escalate to the next level. And an example were the boys that killed one of my neighbors, Steve Gierke, the bartender that was killed in his driveway. He's only 2 blocks away from me. Those boys had been in trouble for numerous things, smaller crimes, for a long time ahead of that. And every time we see a major criminal, whenever you solve a case and we have the perpetrator, the suspect on TV, he almost always has a long rap sheet. They almost virtually never start from zero, that it's their first murder, for instance. And so I see that part of the problem we've gotten into is that we're not taking care of the small crimes, and they're escalating into big crimes. And I understand there's part of that is the use of force. We try to minimize use of force on the police department. And of course, everybody should try to minimize use of force, but there's a certain amount of it that goes with being a police officer. There are just some subjects that are not going to cooperate, and you have to do it the old-fashioned way, the hard way. And but in avoiding those situations where you're potentially get into a fight, we just avoid following up on minor crime. And we, in the middle of a major crime wave in Albuquerque, we've been in there 4 years now, ranked in the top 5 in the country, our jail's half empty. That doesn't make sense. And we closed the overflow jail facility and repurposed it. We no longer use the Montesa Park Detention Center, the old Honor Farm. So what's happened is that the criminals are on the streets. They're ruling the streets, and the innocent people are looking through the bars in their own home, and the crooks are on the outside. It just doesn't make sense, and that's where I see that we need to change our philosophy. We need to start pursuing all crime, and it's expensive. It's expensive to incarcerate prisoners, for instance, but we don't have to keep them long term. For instance. When I left, we were just giving tickets to shoplifters, for instance, even for up to $2,000, which is a pretty good plug there. And some of the shoplifters we could not identify properly, and they did not have an ID, and they did not have an address, so we wrote a ticket and used whatever they gave us and cut them loose with a ticket. Now, that doesn't make a very big impression on most people. Not the same impression they get when they go to jail and they're processed and we can actually identify them. So that's part of the issue. And like your grip operation, when you're out on the streets and actually making arrests and stopping people, I mean, that's an opportunity for goodwill as well as fighting crime. I love doing traffic. I went worked with one officer. He averaged 400 tickets a month. I mean, that's a lot of tickets. Mm-hmm. Our so-called quota was 1 a shift. Well, that's not much. You'd have to be blind or in some kind of bubble. You have your deprivation helmet on for you if you couldn't find 1 traffic violation per shift. It makes a difference. We recovered a lot of stolen vehicles. You make contact with the public. They say, hey, that guy's doing his job, you know. And also at one time, I made it a personal project that when I was working, we worked on the outstanding warrants in my own beat that I lived in, which is in the foothills area. 533 is what APD calls it. And we worked till we cleared every warrant in that beat. And citywide, it's almost incredible. If I ask people, Sheriff, how many warrants do you have as of this last week? And most people, now you'd know what the answer is, but the other people in this room might not know the answer, and they'd guess 100 or maybe 1,000 warrants. No. When I last checked, there was 117,000 outstanding warrants. Now, that's ridiculous. That means that just handing out tickets for misdemeanors means almost a guaranteed no-show. You haven't made any impression on them. They don't have to put up bail. That's part of the bail and prison reform, which has gone the wrong way. I'm sure there's a reasonable approach to everything. Almost always there's a middle ground in between just cutting them loose because you don't know what else to do with them, or you don't want to pay to keep them in there. And I don't mean you have to throw a shoplifter in for 5 years, but it's important that they're at least processed in the jail and we know who they are, and we know the next time. It's just important that we have to show who's in charge here. Is it, you know, and your group operations do that. Right after I attended the one that you had at Tramway and Central, I'm driving downtown later on an errand from my shop, which is over by in the southeast area over there, and I see the sheriff deputies everywhere, and I said, that's the way it ought to be. They know who's out there and who's watching, and it does make a difference. And I happened to think about one of the shootings we had within the last week or two on 7th and Central. Somebody that was apparently an unprovoked shooting, although there's always another story, as you know. It's a business deal gone bad usually. But I just wonder if there'd been a police cruiser in line with the rest of them, if they would have done that.
Well, I'd like to thank Joe for his lesson on fundamental policing. I'd also like to thank the audience for joining us. We'll see you next time.